Fellow for Sierra Business Council for the 2018-2019 year. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do the intro on this before your main presenter, Nikki Caravelli, gets going. So I just want to check in, make sure that everyone can hear me. It sounds like everything sounds like we're good. If there are any issues, please feel free to either type it into the Q&A box or you're welcome to shoot me an email, and that email will be on a slide in just a minute. So the goal of this webinar is to show you, our attendees, the 5 practical steps you should know in your workplace to be adequately prepared for wildfire and to direct you to additional preparedness resources. So first, we'll introduce you to our organization and why we're doing a wildfire preparedness webinar for you today. Then we'll talk about what it means to be prepared and resilient, which are a couple keywords that we'll talk about a lot today. Then we'll walk you through what's called the Business Resilience Toolkit, a set of 5 steps designed to make it easier to get to resilience. And finally, we'll wrap up with a few case studies and additional resources. At any point, you're welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar by typing them into the chat box or Q&A box. We'll address as many as we can. There will also be time at the end for more questions and discussion where we will allow folks to ask their questions out loud and share any stories or resources they may know of, or best practices they have within their own organizations for our other attendees. So here's our agenda, just as a couple housekeeping things. Everyone is automatically muted. If you are not listening to us via computer audio, you can dial in by phone. That is 1-669-900-6833. And the webinar ID is 462-637-932. Once again, for questions, type them into the chat box at any time. We'll address those throughout. If you have any trouble connecting or you're having issues with your connection, please send an email to myself, Simone. That's scordery@sierrabusiness.org, and it's SCORDERYCOTTER@sierrabusiness.org. You can also go to tinyurl.com/zoom-join-support. And of course, we'll distribute the slides, handout, and the recording after the webinar. So just as some background, this webinar is hosted by the Sierra Small Business Development Center and the Sierra Climate Adaptation Mitigation Partnership, also known as Sierra Camp. Both are programs of Sierra Business Council. And I also want to give a thank you to our partners. This is based on the Business Resiliency Initiative, which is a project of Valley Vision, an organization based out of the Sacramento Valley. As you can see, there's my email right there, tinyurl, join support. I'm a little bit ahead of my slides. Sorry about that, guys. Here's additional information for you if you need it. Please take note of that email if you have any connectivity issues. So just a little bit of background on Sierra Business Council. Sierra Business Council is a nonprofit that has been serving the Sierra Nevada region for over 24 years. Sierra Business Council pioneers and demonstrates innovative approaches and solutions to increase community vitality, economic prosperity, environmental quality, and social fairness in the Sierra Nevada. We have 3 program areas: business innovation, climate and energy, and advocacy. One of our business innovation programs is the Sierra Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, as you'll hear us refer to it. The Sierra SBDC is one of 18 centers of the Northern California Small Business Development Center nonprofit organization. All SBDCs provide confidential, no-cost business consulting and affordable training seminars to small and medium businesses, owners, and managers. So the SBDC helps businesses with starting up, growing, management, and operations. It's funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. Since wildfire is obviously a huge risk in the region, and we've seen a number of communities throughout California in the last 2 years quite literally go up in smoke, the Sierra SBDC decided to partner with another Sierra Business Council program called Sierra Camp. So they decided to partner with Sierra Camp to host an online mini workshop for businesses and nonprofits on wildfire preparedness in the workplace. If people have questions or would like to take advantage of free consulting services through the SBDC afterwards, you can go straight to sierrasbdc.org and hit apply now, and someone will be in touch. And then Sierra Camp is a partnership of 40 nonprofits, businesses, and local, state, and federal agencies dedicated to taking action on climate change and protecting the Sierra Nevada communities from adverse impacts. And so as a snapshot of our membership, those are all of our Sierra Camp members. So just for the visual and for everyone's edification, this is a snapshot of who we represent when we talk about our organizational partnerships. One of the adverse impacts of climate change, as I'm sure everyone is aware of, is that with warming temperatures over the next century, wildfires are expected to become a lot more frequent and severe. We'd be happy to discuss the actual science and data behind this in the Q&A at the end. We'd also like to acknowledge that while some folks may believe that climate change is up for debate, that is not the topic of this webinar. We're focused on mitigating wildfire risk and impacts for businesses and organizations, and we just want to be welcoming to everyone in the webinar, regardless of their beliefs. A little bit of background on the Business Resiliency Initiative. In 2017, Sierra Camp was awarded a PG&E Emergency Preparedness Grant with another partner from the Sacramento region to start a pilot program to teach small businesses how to prepare for wildfire. Using that grant, we created a wildfire preparedness toolkit and hosted a few workshops in the spring of 2018. The content from that pilot program is what we'll be presenting to you today in a more condensed version. Almost all of this content is relevant for nonprofits and other organizations, not just businesses. So even if you don't hear us saying content specific to nonprofits or you hear references only to businesses, just know that we're using business as a catch-all phrase, and all this is still relevant if you are not a business, a for-profit business. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to everyone Nikki Caravelli, who will be leading us through the Business Resilience Toolkit. Nikki Caravelli is the project manager for Sierra Camp. She was the coordinator for the Business Resilience pilot program that we conducted last year. Nikki has worked for 3 years with Sierra Business Council, working to increase the resilience of communities, local governments, individuals, and organizations in the Sierra Nevada. So Nikki, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Simone. Let me just get situated here. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. This topic is obviously really important to our region and for actually preserving not only the livelihoods of our businesses, but just the safety and health and vitality of our rural communities. So I'm really glad you are all able to join us today. To start us off, I'm going to play a short introduction video. Hopefully the sound works. If the sound doesn't work, type into the Q&A or chat box and let us know. But here we go. So it looks like we didn't really hear any of the audio, which is fine. We can just skip ahead. Sorry about that. Hopefully we'll cover the content of the video anyway. Okay, so basically it's just introducing the fact that wildfire is really scary and really important, and it's happening more and more frequently. Particularly billion-dollar disaster events. We saw the Paradise Fire was the most expensive natural disaster in the whole world last year. And in general, those huge type of disaster events are growing. So even though we're focusing a lot on wildfire here, I want to emphasize that you know, this content is really relevant for any kind of natural disaster, whether it's an earthquake or flooding or a mudslide or whatever. Just keep that in mind, and keep in mind that you know, we will be seeing more of these more frequently throughout the United States and in California. Unfortunately, in California, 6 out of the 10 most destructive wildfires in California history have occurred only in the last 5 years. So we know that wildfire in particular is really a huge risk in California communities, and especially in the Sierra Nevada region, where we have so many forested regions and the tree mortality crisis. So the risk is real, and yeah, unfortunately, we know that most of our small businesses are not prepared. I think I'm missing a slide here, maybe not. Okay, anyway, so small businesses are the backbone of our rural communities. They make up most of the local jobs and income to the community, and they provide critical services. But small businesses are also the least likely to have a business resilience plan. According to FEMA, almost 60% have no form of disaster plan. And businesses without a resilience plan are also the least likely to reopen or recover after disaster strikes. After a business, sorry, I'm just trying to find the slide that I was looking for. Okay, seems to have disappeared. That's okay. So after a major incident, between 40 and 60% of small businesses actually never reopen. Of the roughly 1,500 businesses that were in Paradise, only a little more than 20 of them are actually currently operating in Paradise. And there can also be other risks. That's why I have this slide here with smoke masks up related to wildfires nearby. You know, a lot of health organizations urge workers not to work in dangerous conditions when there's smoke present. And then if they must work with smoke, they need to be wearing proper masks. And they can also, there is a risk that workers can file complaints with the California Division of Occupational Safety and Health if their businesses and if their employer is not providing proper gas masks. So the bottom line here that I'm just trying to make is that businesses really need to be prepared to help their employees stay safe and healthy in times when their work puts them at risk of smoke exposure. So we're not going to talk a whole lot about smoke in this webinar, but just know that that is a risk that you should be prepared for as well. Okay, so moving on to the next portion, I want to talk a little bit about resilience and what that is. So it's basically the ability to adjust easily to any kind of change. You likely are very resilient in many aspects of your operations already. Resilience is also the end goal of climate change work. We ultimately want to be resilient in the face of whatever may happen, whether it's more wildfires, more flooding, or more drought. So resilience builds upon the concepts of preparedness and recovery by focusing on how businesses can maintain their usual operations in the face of unexpected disasters. It focuses not just on how to get businesses back up and going after something goes wrong, but on also how businesses can position themselves to protect their brand equity, their resources, and their staff from threats in the first place. And of course, I mean, this also applies to nonprofits and protecting their program and their image and continuing to provide their critical services. So sort of like business continuity planning, resilience focuses on preserving the people, assets, and facilities that are crucial to your organization to continue. It's about implementing processes and procedures that can help businesses survive unexpected threats. So recognizing that businesses operate in an environment of continuous change, resilience focuses on how to best preserve value in these complex environments. So one other thing to note, businesses often focus on disaster recovery in terms of their assets, like their supply chains and their equipment and whatnot, yet sometimes can overlook one of their most important assets, which is their staff. And so to really respond when something goes wrong, everyone on your staff must really understand their roles and responsibilities so that they can carry out your resilience and emergency planning procedures. Okay, and so just to kind of hammer home why having preparedness is important, during the Sonoma County fires in an area which is very similar to many parts of the Sierra in terms of visitorship, Small businesses in agriculture are a big part of the Sonoma area economy. It's estimated that the wildfire cost the wine country more than $1 billion in losses to homes and businesses, vehicles, and agricultural equipment. And then during the Ferguson fire, those gateway communities and businesses are estimated to have lost something like 9 to 20% of their revenue because visitors were turned away by park closures and smoke. And the total economic impact on those businesses could have been as much as 50 million. Okay, so how do we get started on resilience? Today I'm going to walk you through the 5 major components of a disaster resilience plan using wildfire as a case study. And note that when I say plan, I don't mean that you need to have a formal 50-page document or something, although a lot of experts do recommend having some sort of formal business resilience plan or continuity plan, as well as an emergency action plan. But your plan can really be something like a folder of key resources and a checklist that you're aware of and your team members are aware of, that everyone has access to. Either way, whatever you choose to do and however you choose to use this information, it should be something that you refer to a couple times a year and continually update. We don't want it to just sit on a shelf and get dusty. Okay, so this is the Business Resilience Toolkit. It's a 5-step process and it breaks down all of the parts of preparedness. I just want to give a shout out to Valley Vision, which is the developer of the toolkit. So if you love it or if you hate it, hopefully you don't hate it, but if you have any questions about it that I can't answer, their email is provided up here on the screen, as well as you can visit their website, resilientbusiness.org, which has most of the content that I'm going to be talking about today. And as well as you can use the phone number listed here to give them a call if you want to talk through it. So just to quickly run through the 5 steps. Number 1, understand your risks in your environment. Number 2, you'll want to assess your readiness. Number 3, take action, develop a plan. Number 4, test and update your plan. And then number 5, engage with community resilience efforts. So I want to just quickly let you know that number 3, take action, is the heftiest part of this whole presentation and the heftiest part of your business resiliency planning efforts. So just keep that in mind, that that's when allocating resources, that's the one that's going to take most time, and I will be digging deep into that. So okay. Understanding your risks in your environment. So for this part, I will discuss the external and environmental risks to businesses in different parts of the community and introduce the concept of a hazard vulnerability assessment, which is a starting point to help you understand your risks in your environment and then prioritize those. So probably the easiest but least scientific way to understand your risks is to just pull up a map of your community and the surrounding environment. If you don't have a whole lot of time or a whole lot of resources to spend researching this stuff, maybe just looking at a map will be helpful for you. It's the bare minimum. So you can kind of use it to familiarize yourself with the parts of your community that you might not frequent regularly. If you're like me, you have your regular places that you go or different paths that you take to get through your community, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're walking through all of the different neighborhoods and different commercial areas, and doesn't necessarily mean you know where all of the streams and creeks and forests are. Or especially if you're a new member to the community, you should definitely kind of get familiar with the layout and the geography of your community. And so a couple of ideas about what to look for. Looking for places that are likely to flood. So where are the rivers and lakes? Where are the sagebrush areas and the forests that are maybe potentially high fire risk? Where are the major evacuation routes? Do you have a highway running through your community? How many highways? How many entrance points to that highway? What places do you know in your community that get a lot of snow and what places get a lot of erosion? Some of those questions you might want to ask around your friends, like, hey, where where would you avoid if you wanted to avoid a place with a lot of likelihood of flooding or erosion or something like that. Okay, so the second resource that I want to point out for you in understanding the risks facing your community are two online mapping tools. So one of them is the State Hazard Mitigation Map. That's this one on the left here. And you can see that there is a checklist on the right of different natural resource risks that you might be facing, including tsunamis, which are probably not a risk up here. Apparently there's some risk of tsunami in Lake Tahoe, but in my lifetime, I've never seen that happen. Of course, the big one that is showing right now is the fire severity zone risk. So you can use this map to zoom in to your community and just take a look at how that risk looks locally. And then another great one for looking at your community's fire hazard ranking is the Cal Fire Hazard Severity Zone map, which is this one on the right. You can just Google Cal Fire Hazard Severity Zone map, and then it'll pop up, and you should be able to find a map and zoom into your community. And this one will have be a little bit more downscaled than the State Hazard Mitigation Map for fire risk. And again, these are tools just like really quick and easy if you don't want to do a whole lot of digging or don't have a lot of time to research more in depth. If you do have more time, probably the best resource for understanding your risks in your environment are local plans. So for instance, a local hazard mitigation plan is something that your local county or your local town should probably have in some form. So you can go to their website and kind of search around, or you can give them a call and they should be able to point you to whatever emergency plan or hazard plan that they have in place. And from there, that plan usually has a section where it breaks down all of the different risks facing the community, as well as where they are, how likely they are to occur, how frequently over time. And those usually go pretty into depth. And I wouldn't suggest going any more in depth than your local plans. I think that those are adequate for kind of understanding your risks overall. So while you're looking at the geography and environment of your community and the risks that are facing it, you'll want to think about the various components of your business. Are you working out of a house? Do you have an office? Do you have a storage space or a warehouse? Do you have vehicles or machinery? Do you have a supply chain? Where are your workers coming from? Where are they working? And then just kind of imagine them moving through the community and in relation to where all of these risks are in relation to those. So once you have a sense of where the high wildfire risk zones and other natural risks are in relation to your buildings and assets, as well as how likely or how often you can expect those risks to happen, you can actually rank them in order of highest risk to lowest risk. So that will help you prioritize your next steps and allow you to focus your limited time on the highest risk. So that process of ranking those risks is essentially what's called a hazard vulnerability analysis, or HVA. So in an email, I'm going to send out these slides as well as this worksheet, this hazard vulnerability assessment worksheet for you all to use, or you can Google online to see if there's a simpler one or a more complex one, depending on whatever tool you like to use. But this worksheet comes with instructions, and it's a great way to break down all the different parts of a hazard vulnerability assessment. So you can see on the left is where you're listing all the different components of your programs or your assets, and then you list your hazards. You list the various specifics of that hazard, like how often it might happen, how strong it might be, You think through whether there are already existing efforts out there to prevent that risk. Is there a fire break in place? Is there a flood mitigation project happening? Has it already happened? You write the probability that the event will occur. Is it maybe a once in a 500-year kind of wildfire event? If that seems like a low probability, then you would put an L. Versus something that might be more frequent. Maybe you have brush fires all the time, then that would be high probability. And then you kind of rank the impacts on each of the different components of your business or your nonprofit. So the people, property, operations, environment, and then entity just means your image, your outward facing persona to the world. And then from there, you can you can combine all of those to determine your overall hazard rating. And I'm just going over this really quickly and really briefly to give you a sense of the steps, but the full worksheet actually does come with directions. So if that was confusing to you at all, know that there is a little bit more to it than that, and hopefully those directions can clarify anything that you might not understand. Here's an example of another one. It's a little bit more complex. This one is by Kaiser Permanente, and it's oriented towards the healthcare system or a health clinic or something like that. But as you can see, they have a column on the left listing all the different types of risks. So they include things like a dam failure or an earthquake or a bombing or something like that. So you can really do every kind of possible imagined risk if you want to in this process. Let me just get a sip of water here.
I haven't seen anything come through our Q&A at all. If anybody has questions, we can probably on the slide. I'm sure Nikki would be happy to stop for just a minute and answer them. But once again, please feel free to use the Q&A section. We're watching that a little more closely than we're watching the chat. So if everybody could keep it to Q&A, that's great. Nikki, will you be sending this one out?
Yes.
Kaiser Permanente
yes.
one? That is it in the Excel spreadsheet? Or is it in PDF?
So this one is linked. It'll be in a browser window when I send it out. The other one will be an actual attachment. So yeah, you can take a look at both. Okay, seeing no questions come through, which is fine. We can move on to step 2, assess your readiness. Now that you know how to understand your risks in your environment, I want to walk you through some self-assessment tools you can use to understand how prepared you already are. So this tool in particular is really great. I really recommend using this tool. It's called the Red Cross Ready Rating Tool by Red Cross, and it's very robust. It's expertly developed, and businesses and nonprofits can use it to do that initial assessment for readiness. It'll show you what you're already doing well as any gaps that you need to fill. So in order to use this tool, you'll need to sign up to become a member. You just have to sign their disclosure agreement and fill out a form with your information, but it is free. And then from there, let me just cover this slide real quick. Okay, so the Ready Rating tool, just gives you a tool to understand what you're already doing well. And it has a couple of different resource components. It has checklists, helps you track your improvement over time. There's a bunch of different components that you can use once you've gotten started. And then just to reiterate, you need to become a member. So once you've become a member, the next step is to take a self-assessment. And there's 2 types of self-assessments. Let me just skip. Yes, okay, here. So there's 2 types of self-assessments that you can take on the Ready Rating Red Cross Ready Rating tool. One of them is kind of more in depth and takes longer. So if you don't have a lot of time, you might want to choose the other one, which is Ready Go. Ready Go is just a few questions, takes about a half hour, and that's a really nice, fast, easy one. Whereas the other one, if you really want to make sure you're hitting all of your bases and really dig into emergency preparedness, then I would choose the Ready Advanced Assessment tool. And the assessments are broken down into these different sections, as you can see. And at the end of your assessment, it will generate a report for you, which tells you what your next steps should be. This tool will also help you understand what your commitment level needs to be, help you understand basic components of emergency planning, what you need to know about preparing your facilities and your equipment, how to train your employees and run through exercises, as well as how to create kind of a more organizational culture of preparedness from the bottom to the top of your nonprofit or your business. And then finally, it goes over how to work with preparedness efforts in your overall community. So in addition to the assessment, Ready Rating also has an emergency action plan template. The State Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or OSHA for short, requires a lot of different businesses to have one of these, an emergency action plan. So even though they don't explicitly require every business to have an emergency action plan, most businesses do need to have one, either to meet local city or local county requirements, or because their work falls under the Cal OSHA standards. So it's a good idea for everyone to have one, even if you're not explicitly required to have one. And this online template will help you easily do that. And that emergency action plan is something that should be included in your overall business resiliency plan. It's one component of a lot of different things that will enable overall resilience. So really recommend using this tool. Just like the Ready Rating assessment, there's two versions. You can use the EAP Go, which is, again, a quick and dirty one, versus the EAP Advance, which is much more in-depth, takes a lot longer, but will be more comprehensive. Just a quick overview, again, of the step, assess your readiness. So I really recommend joining Ready Rating. Register to join. It takes about a minute. It's free. Measure your preparedness by doing the assessment. Then use the Energy Action Plan template tool. And then start improving by using your next steps report, which came out of your assessment. And then you're ready to take action. Woo! Okay, so at this point, you know your risks and you know how ready you are should one of those risks become a reality. And now is the time to do the sustained work of developing a full business resilience plan and take any of the steps along the way to act on that plan. The good news is, so this is like I said earlier, this is the most comprehensive, work-intensive part of being resilient in the face of a disaster, developing a plan and actually taking action. But the good news is that there's a wealth of information about these topics and continuity planning available online. There's many experts available for both in-person and online consultants. The CIRA Small Business Development Center is one of those. And finally, there's a number of different specific disaster preparedness business consultants that we can connect you with as well. One of them is Connect Consulting, and they helped us formulate the content for this workshop. So there are lots of ways to get hands-on support and help developing your business resilience plan and taking action on it if you need it. And it's also entirely doable to develop a plan without any help and with just your own resources and information provided in this toolkit, and you should be totally fine. Okay, so the major components of a business resilience plan are continuity planning, which is basically the steps you need to take to minimize the risks in the first place, as well as to recover quickly if something were to happen. The second major component is an emergency action plan, which we already covered, which is basically just everything you need to do immediately during a disaster to stay safe and save critical parts of your business or your nonprofit programs. And then finally, the third major component is information technology disaster recovery planning. So steps you need to take to make sure that your technology and your data is recoverable. If you're curious what a full plan outline might look like, and you happen to really want to make one, here's an example of the section headers. It's a lot. It looks like there's a lot of stuff here that you would need to have. So this is, if you have a lot of resources, you have a lot of time to do this and you want to do it right, or you want to do it like really, really right, this is one way you can do it. You can create a full-blown plan, and this is what it might look like at the end of it. So to kind of break this section of taking action down, the Business Resilience Toolkit offers 8 take action items as part of this section. So again, this is why this part is the most bulky part of our presentation. And so, okay, so I'm gonna walk you through each of the 8 take action items. The first one is assemble a team. So this team that you're going to assemble is going to kickstart the process, and it's going to do 2 things: lead the development of your business resilience plan, and also act as emergency management leadership during a disaster. So this team should consider both internal and external dependencies that keep your business running and your customers happy. If you're a nonprofit, your program's running and your impact continuing. So the size of your organization absolutely determines how many people should be on your team. If you're a small company, just having the owner or operator might be sufficient, and then they go ahead and train all of their employees. If you're a larger organization, maybe a lead person from each department or work area can be named and put on the team. But it should really be a cross-functional team and have representation from all the different parts of your organization. Excuse me. Regardless of the size of your company, though, you really have to make sure that there's leadership from the top. It's essential to have leadership involved to make sure that the planning actually does happen and that resources are dedicated to this. So the disaster planning team, once you've identified everybody, everyone should be assigned specific roles for if in the event a disaster happens. So you would ideally write this down in your business resilience checklist or toolkit or folder or whatever you're doing to organize your information. So some of the roles that you might assign to folks, maybe people have multiple roles, or maybe each person only has one role, is retrieving emergency kits. If something happens, if a wildfire rolls through and you're stuck in your building, who's in charge of grabbing that stuff? Someone should be in charge of coordinating the building evacuation and making sure everyone gets out safely, if that needs to happen. Someone should be in charge of accounting for all of the employees and communicating information to them about what they should be doing and how they can be safe. Someone should be in charge of shutting down utilities and safeguarding the business location or the building that you're in, or whatever key assets that you might need to safeguard to keep your business going. Someone should be keeping track of any disaster-related costs. So this is potentially a little bit after the emergency situation has passed. You'll want to have someone who can go through and take stock of everything that has been saved and everything that might have burned down. And then finally, you want someone who is able to put the emergency communications plan into effect, they can call anyone who isn't in the office, they can call their suppliers, they can call, whoever needs to be called to make decisions and make sure everybody is safe. And just another planning tip on this one, if you're the owner or operator of a small business or small nonprofit, your planning team might consist of you and a few critical partners, such as someone who might provide you with IT or bookkeeping support. So for instance, here at Sierra Business Council, we have an IT guy. His name is Ed. He's great. We would totally want him on our disaster preparedness team because he knows all about our information technology and our computer systems and our backup. He's a really key partner in understanding how we can recover that data in a disaster. And we'd probably also want someone from the town of Truckee building department on our team because they are our landlords. We rent space from them. So we'd want to understand what systems they have in place and how we can work with them and the rest of the tenants in this building. If you're a larger organization, you might want to just designate a key employee or lead manager from each department, maybe one person from sales, from operations, and from customer service. Yeah, just making sure that your team is comprehensive. I'm gonna pause briefly here to just see if anyone has any questions so far, clarifications. Okay. Seeing none, I will continue. I know this is a lot of information, so I just want to reiterate, if you start to zone out or you're worried that you're not capturing everything, this whole slide all these slides will be sent out after the webinar. Okay, so the next part of taking action is developing and updating a contact list. Many of you probably already have a contact list, but just making sure that it's updated and really robust and includes all of the different contacts that you might need in an emergency is really important. The ability to communicate effectively both before, during, and after a disaster is possibly the most important component of your resilience plan. And that includes both internal within your staff, as well as external communications with key partners and suppliers that you might work with on a daily basis. So, for instance, you'll need to communicate with key groups such as employees, families, customers and clients, vendors, partners, suppliers, I already said, maybe even the media, maybe even the community at large, public officials, your insurance providers. In your your contact list should include not only primary phone numbers for all of these groups of people, but also alternate phone numbers just in case those don't work. So both like maybe a business number and the cell phone numbers if you can have those. And you should keep copies of this contact list both on site at your office, your facility, and at home. Ideally, maybe each department head has a copy of your contact list. And then storing a backup copy online is also a good idea. And of course, updating it regularly. A strong communications plan will include knowing who is on the communications team and what role they're supposed to play, who's supposed to be contacting the employees, who's supposed to be contacting your partners. Another key part of your planning is having a single point of contact for everyone to get in touch with. Having a master list of again, everyone that I just mentioned, including utility providers, local and state government, and then having redundant communications identified. So identifying any workaround lines of communications in case one of them goes down. For instance, if your telephone lines are down in your office, how will you handle calls from your customers, or how will you handle calls from emergency personnel? Do you have cell phones? Do you have radios? Do you have internet? Do you have some other backup communication method? And having that plan for how you're going to communicate with your customers during and after an emergency is especially critical. So maybe if your storefront goes down or something and people see that you're gone, they're going to wonder what's happening. Where's this business? If you have a website or if you have social media up, then you can use both of those to inform your customers what's happened, what you're doing, if you're relocating temporarily, if they want to support you, what they can do. So just having a plan for that in place is going to be really helpful for you. And regardless of what alternatives for communication that you identify, just make sure you understand their full capabilities ahead of time, test them out, make sure that you know that they'll work for you the way that you want them to. And then a final planning tip on this, it can be helpful to have a laminated emergency contact card just to keep in your wallet, which should include contact information for local police and fire, city or county office of emergency services, utility providers, and then alternate phone numbers for key employees and suppliers. Okay, step number 3. I really like this one just because I like emergency kits. It was something that I was always fascinated with as a kid. Like, ooh, let's get out the fun kit and pretend there's something crazy happening. I don't know, maybe that's weird, but so you want to make sure your business or your nonprofit has an updated and well-stocked emergency kit. I know that Sierra Business Council has a small emergency kit with like Band-Aids and, aspirin and kind of like little mini health kit, but I wouldn't say it's a full emergency kit, so we should probably update it. You really want everything that you may need in the event that you're either asked to evacuate from your building or required to shelter in place. And the purpose of this kit is to ensure you're just self-reliant until help is able to arrive. If you're in a really remote location and suddenly you're blocked off from all escape routes and emergency personnel are dealing with other things, maybe the town is exploding, I don't know, you want to be able to sustain yourself for a couple days in the event that that's happening. This is just a list of all of the things that you can include in your emergency kit. You can kind of read through it at your leisure. There's a number of different types of emergency kits available for purchase online. There's a lot of organizations list different things. So if you want to compile it yourself, or if you think you have all of these things on your own, you don't need to purchase it, that's great. So you can just download an already existing list. FEMA has a great list for both business and at home. Nationwide also has a great list. The one that's shown here, I believe we purchased from Amazon for about $70, and then we raffled it off at one of our workshops. So if you can purchase one of these for each of your buildings that you might be working in, or if you only have one building, maybe that's all you need one. It's a really good idea to have that. Step 4 in this Take Action series is to back up your data. This one is hugely essential, probably almost as essential as having a communications plan. And there's 2 steps to successfully backing up your data. One is knowing which type of data is most critical to back up. And then the second is making sure your backup is happening on a regular schedule. But it's also, in addition to those 2, it's important to know about how you're going to retrieve and restore it. So what that process entails, how long it's going to take. Some backup systems are better than others in supporting recovery and restoration. So if you have a data backup provider, or someone that you can turn to that's really knowledgeable about IT. Make sure that they explain and demonstrate how the recovery process might work. Also, make sure that your backups are actually happening as frequently as you want them to and as completely as you want them to, and test them regularly from different locations. The point of testing is to make sure that you have all of the essential business data that you need in your backup files and that you know how to access that information. It's also helpful to have more than one person who understands where and how to access your backup data. So that's a really key strategy for resilience during a wildfire event. A couple of different examples of backup systems are Google Drive, iCloud, external hard drives. Maybe you use CDs, which is also fine. Ideally, you don't want to have huge filing cabinets full of lots of important documents. You want to, if you have those, at least make sure that those important documents are saved up digitally as well, because you're not going to want to run out of your building with 20 boxes of files. It's just not going to happen. A second huge component of backup is having backup cache. There's a story that I read the other day about George Shaw, who is a local hotel owner near Yosemite, and he's a local hotel owner who lost $200 in revenue because of the Ferguson fire and the impacts that fire had on his local community, and the fact that Yosemite had shut down during the Ferguson fire for something like 20 days. And so people weren't coming to his community, even though his community wasn't being burned, it wasn't threatened by the wildfire, people just didn't come. And so he lost $200 in revenue or $200,000, excuse me, in revenue, and was forced to fire 8 of his 43 employees. And he's quoted saying, "If I hadn't had savings, which were depleted in this event, I'd be scrambling for money or I wouldn't have a business." And just a second example of how important this is, Scott Gehrman, who was a local tour company manager in the same area, had to cancel all of his tours that were scheduled for the area because of the Ferguson fire. And he actually had to refund people the money that they'd already paid him. And so that was a huge, huge loss. Okay, so number 5 in take action, you'll want to review your insurance coverage. This is also huge, especially for post-disaster recovery steps. So read your insurance policies carefully. Make sure that your insurance broker clarifies anything with you that you might be uncertain about. Just sit them down and ask every little question that you can possibly think of. It can be really helpful to run through some what-if scenarios with them. So ask them, what if my burning builds to the ground? What if I end up under 6 feet of water? What if my building burns and then a mudslide comes through? Talk about not only what is covered and what's not covered and to what extent, but also about what to expect during the claims process, such as who will you be working with, how much time will lapse before reimbursement is made, how assets are going to be valued, and what proof the insurer will require. So reviewing coverage for the top priority risks you face in your business location is really, really imperative. 2 kinds of insurance that are most important in the event of a disaster are property insurance and business interruption insurance. So I recommend having both of those if you have the ability and the access in your area. Property insurance secures the value of your business's assets, including buildings, computers, equipment, office furnishings, and so on, whereas business interruption coverage reimburses you for income you would lose during an involuntary shutdown. You'll also want to keep track of your assets. So make a list and take pictures and videos and back them up so that you not only know what you have before there are any potential losses, but you can prove it to your insurance coverer. You should probably scan your receipts and keep everything together in one place. And during a regional disaster, insurance agents are likely to be just really overwhelmed with all of the calls and claims. So having all of this information really well organized, backed up, and on hand will help you during your claims process. Okay. Number 6. So you'll want to take some time to identify your critical business functions and how long you can operate without them. And this is one of the core efforts of planning for business resilience during a disruption. This step really requires the highest level of effort because it's so critical. With your team that you assembled in step 1, you'll want to brainstorm each of your business or nonprofit processes, systems, and assets that you would need to restore operations back to their previous level after a disaster. So this is definitely going to be different for every nonprofit and every business. A law office, for example, might need access to docketing software, conference rooms to meet with clients, a complete list of clients in courts, as well as their case histories, and maybe a way to communicate with clients in courts, even if the local city infrastructure is down. Whereas an insurance company might only need laptops or tablets and Wi-Fi, and maybe portable printers or something, and then everyone can work from home. So understanding your key business essentials is a huge step in planning how to get them operational again. So to get started on this step, you can just begin by listing all business functions that come to mind, just anything that comes to mind, just a brainstorming session. And then from there, you can narrow down your list and kind of highlight each one that is really, truly essential. So it's a lot easier to just remove items from the list than to try to identify gaps later on in the process. And then documenting and prioritizing those functions in your business resilience plan, and being specific about how many days your company can operate without that function is really important. In some cases, there might be a lot of functions where the answer is you can operate 0 days without them. So that's really important to know. Can you take a week off without having something happening? What will be the consequences of that timeline? And then shown here on the screen is just another tool you can use to analyze your essential functions. So on the left, you have a ranking of tier 0 to tier 4, with tier 0 being absolutely critical, mission critical. And then you have your description of the tasks that might fall into that, as well as how many hours can you go without that task. Number 7 in take action is find an alternate place to work, or what I call a safe house. So it's critical to think about where you might temporarily set up or even potentially permanently relocate your business before a disaster strikes, not during. That'll just make it easier to know exactly where you need to go in order to keep things going. You don't want to wait until your facility has already become inaccessible or non-operational. And so the options that you identify as your backup location should be a part of your disaster resilience plan and be listed, and your team members should know where that is. They should have an understanding that, hey, if this part of the community is down, this part has been burned down by a wildfire, we're going to go with plan A, relocation, so that maybe that's moving to the other side of town or something like that. Or we're going to go with plan B because the whole town is gone or something like that. With a well-planned and well-tested program, everyone should know what to do and where to go. So options for alternate facilities could include maybe a shared space agreement with another business, such as a neighboring facility or a partner in another town. You could have even a work at home plan where possible, which might really only be a short-term solution. Or you might have a previously agreed upon professionally provided backup facility, which might be a mobile location or a fixed location somewhere else. So you should probably have more than one of these alternate locations, and just in case your first choice is also affected by the disaster and not available. So just an example of where having an alternate was really useful. In River City, the River City Food Bank partnered with a local nonprofit and Party Concierge, which is a small business. And they had the unenviable situation of looking for alternate work locations when their buildings burned to the ground. But fortunately for them, they had a lot of community support, and community members provided access to space for them to help keep their businesses going while they were trying to rebuild. So identifying alternate work locations in advance can help you keep your team going during disaster. And finally, step 8. This is the last part of the take action, big part of the toolkit. So preparing your employees. Business preparedness is a key part of business preparedness, is making sure that all of your employees know what to do and are safe. It might be the most important aspect of your disaster resilience plan. I know I've said multiple things are really important. I really think employee preparedness is number one, even above, and everything else should enable employee preparedness. So your communications, your alternate location, your emergency kit, all of that stuff is supporting your employees and your staff and yourself. So and that's, if you don't have your employees, there's no business, there's no profit, there's no nothing happening without your staff. So helping them be prepared and feel safe both at work and at home is really critical, because employees who have taken the time to prepare themselves and their families are more likely to be effective and present during and following a disaster. If someone is dealing with their family and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't have any support, and they aren't able to effectively relocate or make sure that their family is safe, they're not going to be able to help you in your business. They're just not. So doing everything you can to help them understand disaster preparedness will help your business or your nonprofit too. So once you have some semblance of a business resilience plan, you'll want to make sure all of your employees have a copy of it, or at least understand how to implement it or where to access it. So maybe it's a checklist behind your operations manager or something, or maybe it's in their employee binder that you give them when you onboard them and then you walk through it. So just making sure everyone's well trained on the plan and know where to go if a disaster happens. You should probably repeat your training. You should train them at least annually and integrate emergency preparedness into all new employee onboarding processes, and as well as maybe even including it in performance reviews. Some specific ways to ensure that employees feel safe and are trained appropriately include maintaining a list of all employees that are trained in first aid and CPR, making sure that employees know how to access that list, helping each employee create his or her own emergency kit at work and in their vehicle and at home, offer emergency and disaster response skills trainings at the office, conduct evacuation drills annually or semi-annually. If you're a larger business, maybe you can even partner with the fire department to do a run through or to have them present to your team. And then you can invite other speakers to present on preparedness. So some examples are local emergency management personnel and the Red Cross. And then one other thing I want to touch on for preparing your employees is that the mental health aspects of disaster planning are increasingly important to consider. As part of preparing your employees for disaster, you should try to share information with them about any existing mental health services and support systems in your community. Be open about the fact that there are really real mental health risks when a disaster strikes, or even just in general in everyday life, and provide information about resources before a crisis. And by doing that, you communicate your concern not only for your employees, but you also enable them to be proactive. So one other aspect of that is that I wouldn't underestimate the benefits of having your business continuing to run after a disaster. That can be really, really helpful for your employees to just have that regularity to come back to. It helps them reestablish a regular routine, and familiar habits and responsibilities can just make people feel really comfortable when everything else in their lives is uncomfortable. It's nice to have something that is known and reliable to turn back to. And also, it's your work family, so it's nice to have those people that you know and work with and interact with on a daily basis, all working together for the same non-mission critical activities after a crisis. And then you have a real opportunity here as a business manager or leader or whatever your role might be in a disaster to be that hub of support. You are in that unique place where you can help your team feel cared for, help your team feel confident and encouraged, and help them pull together as a unit and capitalize on your already existing strengths as a team. So just helping your team feel cared for and knowing that you are there as a company or as a nonprofit employer supporting them can make a huge, huge difference. So I can't reiterate enough how important it is to really think through how you can support your employees and make sure that they have the resources to prepare themselves at home and in the workplace. Whew, that's a lot. I know that's a lot. 8 steps within 5 steps. So I'm just going to take a pause here and see if anyone has any questions, any comments, observations while I get a drink of water. Okie doke. Not seeing any questions come through, which is totally fine. But it looks like everyone's still with us, so that's encouraging. Okay, so moving on. There's only 2 more steps to the full business resilience toolkit, but luckily they're really short and sweet. And then after that, I'll talk about some resources as well as open it up for questions again if you have them. So step 4 of the full toolkit, after you've taken action and developed your full plan or checklist or whatever form you've put it in, you want to make sure you test it and update it regularly. It's almost as important as creating the plan itself. So you don't want your plan to be collecting dust. You want it to really change as your business or your nonprofit does. If the contact list you created is out of date when disaster strikes, it won't really be much of use in responding to an emergency or in recovering your business. So making sure everything's up to date, making sure your backup's happening, Testing your plan to make sure it works as anticipated is so critical. If you haven't tested it, you can't possibly know if the strategies that you've identified are going to be successful. So you'll want to test it at least once a year and incorporate those lessons learned every time. And it's especially important to test the critical functions that you identified, and particularly those ones that would be most vulnerable during a disaster. A couple of examples of how you can test your resilience plan is to do a tabletop test or a drill. So a tabletop exercise can help you analyze the effectiveness of your business plan in an informal, stress-free environment. This approach is cost-effective and easy, and focus on your staff and the people and walking them through the tasks that they need to perform in a recovery. And during a tabletop exercise, what you do is walk through a scenario and ask what if questions. So if a wildfire comes through, where are the smoke masks? What are we going to do first? Where is the emergency exit? Where should we all be gathering? Walking them through each of those steps of emergency evacuation or shelter in place. This type of test will help you uncover holes in your plan and help you refine it and improve it. And it'll also help you build confidence in your plan and in your employees in the fact that you have a plan and that it works, and improve your overall readiness. After conducting a few tabletop exercises, you might consider running through a drill. So a drill, we've all done a fire drill. So just doing that regularly, our building does that for us. So we all just do it, I think, once a year. But there might be other drills that you might want to walk through. Sometimes running a drill can be a little bit more complex than a tabletop exercise, but it's a good way to ensure that everyone knows what to do before an emergency occurs. Another type of test is to just do a functional test. So for instance, you could pretend there is a power outage, the electricity grid has completely gone out because a wildfire has decimated the local power lines, or the power lines have decimated the local forest, whatever. The electric grid is no longer functioning, everything's ruined, you can't have energy for like 3 weeks. What are you going to do about your data? Run through that, just break it down and focus on one component of your plan. So not even worrying about evacuation or anything, just your data and recovering your data and how that will work. And finally, the last toolkit step is engaging with community resilience efforts. So even though planning for what you and your organization can personally control within your 4 walls of your office is obviously important and essential, but you're also a part of a larger community, and you're reliant on the various public infrastructure and public systems, which are usually outside of your control, right? But they're not outside of your influence. So if you can take steps to connect with your neighboring businesses and your neighboring or your local nonprofit or your local government to create a network of preparedness before anything happens, then the network overall is going to be more resilient and quick to respond in a disaster. So for instance, if you have a row of businesses, maybe you reach out to each of the owners of that business and say, hey, you guys have a disaster preparedness plan. Maybe we can come together and host a workshop for our employees or something. Or maybe you all have a plan that you walk through. So if you all need to evacuate together, you have someone that runs down the line and says like, hey, we all need to evacuate, initiate plan A, and then you all move as a business community to a safe location or something like that. So some other potential contributions that might be specific to your type of business is If you're maybe a hardware store, then you might be able to provide a bunch of equipment or something. Or if you're a grocery store, you might be able to provide food for people. If you are a daycare or a school, maybe that's a really important community gathering place, or even a place that people go to sleep, right? You can be maybe a community resilience hub or something like that. So there's all these different ways that you can offer your program or your nonprofit or business's space and your skills, and maybe you are a really good organizer. You can help volunteer with any recovery efforts. Just trying to identify those ways you can help your overall community be resilient will help you and your family and your business be resilient as well. And coordinating with local government efforts, making sure that you are aware of what your emergency personnel will be doing during an emergency. How you can support what they're doing, asking them how you can get involved in their planning processes, making sure that you're aware of how you recognize that you're reliant on the public infrastructure and public systems, and that it's in your own best interest that your disaster plans in your community are robust and really work well. And so engaging in those processes. All right, we have officially finished the toolkit. We only have 9 minutes left for this webinar. Which is fine. It doesn't seem like folks have too many questions, but if you do have questions, think of them later. Feel free to email me, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. But I just want to recap the toolkit real quick. So you'll start off by understanding your risks and your environment, move on to assessing your ability and your readiness to adapt to those. Then you're going to want to develop your plan and start taking action. You'll want to then regularly test and update your plan. And then finally, engage with community resiliency efforts. And then just to really quickly recap the 8 steps of the take action section: assemble a team, update contact list, prepare your emergency kit, back up your data, review your insurance coverage, determine essential functions, find an alternate place of work, and then prepare your employees. All right, we did it. Okay, I'm just going to walk through a couple of different resources. So I'm going to pull up, this is Valley Vision's Business Resilience Initiative website. So if you go over to this website, resilientbusiness.org, here's the toolkit. It's basically everything that I just talked through, and it has a list of resources. So effective guide to disaster planning, et cetera, et cetera. So if this format works better for you, I encourage you to check that out. And then I want to highlight this resource in particular. This is a wildfire kind of addendum specific to the maybe things that are particular to the wildfire risks that you should be aware of. So this is just going over some of the risk components, how to prepare your property, a couple tips on that, how to prepare your employees, and then some community resources. And then finally, this table is going to be really useful. It goes through, for instance, defensible space, and then it breaks down how to take action based on whether you're the owner of your building or your assets, or you're renting your space. So looking at defensible space, roofing gaps, why they're at risk, skylights, gutters, vents, windows and door glass. So this is a really, really great resource for just taking a look at your facility and anything that you can do to make your facility overall more resilient. Okay, need to figure out where my, okay. And I want to really quickly highlight that, again, our Sierra Small Business Development Center can help. We can provide one-on-one consulting if you're a business. If you're a nonprofit, I apologize, we don't have funding right now to provide consulting for you unless you were able to provide us funds to help you out. So otherwise, if you're a business, we can provide free consulting for you. Sorry about that, nonprofits. We're doing what we can to see if we can find resources for you, but this is the best we have right now. But if you are a business and you're interested in consulting, go ahead and go to the Sierra SBDC website and you can click the Apply Right Now button, and someone will reach out to you and see what sort of support you're looking for and then hook you up with a consultant. And I should note that right after this, there's also going to be a survey. Please fill out that survey, and in that survey, you'll also have the opportunity to say whether or not you want additional resources. So again, these are the links that you should take note of, and you can follow these to take the Ready Rating assessment, and resilientbusiness.org is the website I just showed you. And then our website on our program and our project and everything that we're doing over at Sierra Business Council is this third link. All right, any questions? Hopefully no one's as confused as this guy on the screen, but I thought he was funny. Go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box. I'm not sure that we have the capability to actually have people call in and voice their questions. I thought we did, but I don't think we do. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, which hopefully means that I did a fantastic job of presenting. Everyone knows exactly what they need to do and where they need to go, which is awesome. Again, if you do think of questions, feel free to just email me. And please do send this stuff, send the recording, which we'll send out, send the slides, send the links, send everything to your community. We really want to spread this far and wide. So we want this to be a resource for as many people as possible. And so once you exit the webinar, this survey will hopefully pop up in your browser. I'll also email it to you. Please do take the survey. Let us know how you did. Let us know how we could have done it better if you think we could have done it better. I wish you all luck in preparing your business or your nonprofit for wildfire. Thank you, everybody. Here's my contact information, and have a wonderful rest of your day.